Hey guys, if you are all looking for a side hustle to make some extra money, I discovered a way to make money just from your phone. It's all through a program called freecash.com, which partners with mobile games looking for new users to try their apps. I'll show you how it works, and it is 100% legit. Scan the QR code to download their mobile app where you can see earning opportunities, track your progress, and cash out. Once you download and sign up, pick a game. I recommend Dice Streams because it is the fastest to earn on. Then check out the directions and what levels you have to hit to get paid out. Once you hit the levels, the money will clear into your freecash.com app where you can cash it out. Freecash.com is completely free, and they're looking for people to try out the games they have partnered with. They also have daily giveaways and cash back on some purchases, but the games is really the best feature in my opinion. I have tried it myself and recommend you try it as well. It's not going to make you rich, but if you already like mobile games anyways, it's a way to make $10 to $20, with some games paying $300 plus if you really want to dedicate the time. Scan the QR code or hit the link in the description and check it out. It's completely free. It was late October of last year. I was working at a small diner just outside of town. The kind of place where the coffee's always hot and the same 5 people show up every night. I knew the rhythm of that place like the back of my hand. That night started off like any other until she walked in. She had long blonde hair tied back, not messy, not neat, just still. Her jacket looked old, beige with a stitched sunflower on the sleeve. She moved slowly like she wasn't in a hurry. I didn't think much of it at first. People come and go. She didn't order right away. Just sat down at a booth and stared out the window for a while. No phone, no bag. Just sitting, watching nothing, watching the glass. Eventually, I walked over. "Hey, what can I get you?" She turned to me, tilted her head, and then said, "You look different in person." That was the first thing she said to me. Not hello, not hey, I'll have a coffee. No, I kept my face straight. Have we met? She shook her head. No, well, not officially. I laughed once just to ease the tension, but my chest was tight. There was something weird in her eyes. Not angry, not crazy, just focused. Too focused. I took her order, grilled cheese and water. She didn't touch either, just sat there watching me. Every time I looked back, her eyes were already there, like she was waiting for me to mess up. At one point, I walked past her booth and she reached out, touched my wrist, gentle like a whisper, then said, "You were outside your house last Thursday. You looked tired." My heart dropped. I never told anyone about that. Last Thursday, I'd been sitting outside my apartment at 3 a.m. drinking a soda and just thinking about life. It was a dark corner. No one was there. No cars passed by. I stepped back. "Are you following me?" She didn't answer, just blinked, like the question didn't make any sense. I told her she needed to leave. I didn't shout. I didn't panic. I just kept my voice steady and strong. She stood slowly, walked to the door, and before leaving, said this, "I just wanted to see if you'd remember. You forgot last time." She didn't look back. I locked the door behind her, didn't wait till closing. I picked up the phone and called the police right then. I gave the clearest description I could. Blonde hair, sunflower sleeve, pale skin, green eyes. I told them about the way she spoke, about what she said, about the night outside my house. They sent me a cruiser and took my statement, pulled the diner's camera footage. I watched them rewind it. Her face never blinked, not once, just staring like she wasn't there for the food. They said they'd follow up, but I never heard anything back. A few days later, I bought a camera for my apartment door. I started carrying a pocket knife. I didn't want to walk home anymore in silence. Always had music or something in my ears. I kept pretending I was fine, but I wasn't sleeping. I didn't want to talk to anyone about it, not even my close friends. It just sounded too strange, like I was overthinking. But I knew what I saw. I knew what I felt. Eventually, I went to a therapist. I told him everything, every little thing. He looked serious the whole time, said sometimes people get fixated, said maybe they'd been watching longer than I knew, that it wasn't my fault, that she might have done this to others before. We talked for weeks. I still go sometimes, not because I'm scared anymore, but because I want to understand what happened. The truth is, I don't know what she wanted from me. I haven't seen her again. No knocks on the window, no sunflower jacket, no weird messages, nothing. But sometimes when I walk home alone and I hear a pair of footsteps behind me that stop when I stop, I think about her face. I think about what she said. You forgot last time, and I wonder, what did I forget? It's something that I guess I'll never really understand. Hello everyone, my name is Dakota B. I will not use anybody's real last name for privacy reasons, except for the famous names already known here. This is a true and disturbing story that happened to my boyfriend Cody and I in our home state of Texas in the year of 1969. The story does have some violence in it, so if you want to skip it, please do. Thank you. My boyfriend Cody and I met in a small town in Texas in elementary school. When we were in high school, we started to date. Cody was a light smoker, and I called him the Marlboro Man after the cigarette commercials in the 1950s and 60s that used to run on TV. For the sake of the story, I will call Cody mainly Cowboy, the nickname that I usually gave him. Cowboy was a good-looking guy with short brown hair and brown eyes on a muscular build. He wore black and white short-sleeve shirts to highlight his muscles, and he wore blue jeans and cowboy boots. He wore cowboy hats on his head sometimes also. Cowboy also loved John Wayne and Gary Cooper cowboy movies. He owned a Colt revolver handgun and shot tin cans in a spacious backyard. He also loved his German Shepherd dog named Apollo. As for me, I had long brown hair and blue eyes. I wore dresses, blue jeans, and shorts depending on the occasion and what I was doing. Cowboy worked with his father at a hardware store, and he had his own 1955 red Chevy Bel Air car to drive, which he drove me around on dates. Cowboy and I also really loved riding our horses down horse riding trails and up into the mountains. I was lucky my father was a banker and we were well off. Through my father, Cowboy and I met through the Texas governor, John B. Carleigh. He was the governor of Texas in 1963 to 1969. Carleigh and his wife were in the same motorcade when President John Kennedy was assassinated. Cowboy and I both were 18 years old at the time. We were still in high school, but we were going to graduate in a few months. Richard Nixon had taken over as President of the United States on January 20th, 1969, with Spiro Agnew as his vice president. When Texas-owned Lyndon Johnson stepped down as president, the Vietnam War was in full swing at this time. There were flower children everywhere and many protesters to the war. After high school was over, Cowboy and I planned to go to the University of Texas together. The civil rights movement had finally ended the segregation of blacks in the South in 1968, but the Ku Klux Klan still existed and there was still racism around. But Cowboy and I had hopes that America would move away from this and be better off from it. We were not racist and we had friends of various races and religions. Everything was going well for my boyfriend Cowboy and I, when one day I was just coming out of the food market and I felt a sharp knife on my back, and it hurt. I looked back to see one of the meanest looking young ladies I'd ever seen in my life. This lady was young in her 20s, had an acne-scarred face and a few missing teeth. The teeth she did have were rotting and yellow, with long braided blonde hair. This lady looked like she had never had it easy in life and was terrifying looking, wearing her pink raggedy dress over her real thin, malnourished body. "This little piggy went to market. This little piggy never made it home," she said to me menacingly. Do not talk, little piggy, or you are dead. My sister will explain everything when we walk to the truck over there, she told me menacingly. When I got into the front seat, a lady who looked exactly like the one who captured me looked at me from behind the wheel. Hi, Missy. I'm Bessie, and this is my sister Tessie. Yes, as you can tell, we're identical twins, she said with an evil laugh. My sister Tessie and I know all about your family and that you're rich. We plan to put you up for ransom. When your father gives us the money, we will probably kill you and flee the country, and they will find your corpse in a trunk somewhere, she said with a cackle as the truck took off down the road. After some minutes of driving, I looked back to see my boyfriend Cowboy following us. He must have seen me being kidnapped from the food market. Cowboy and his dog Apollo were smart. They were following us from a distance, not letting the evil twin sisters know they were being followed. The white truck finally stopped at a big house, but an unkempt one, as the sisters dragged me out of the truck and pushed me down the basement steps. The smell of the house smelled like cat urine, as Tessie forcefully put me in my seat facing Bessie. You know, little bitch, my sister and I have always hated the rich. They always look down at poor folks like us, she hissed. I then started to object to this notion as Bessie gave me a hard slap to the face. I may have been wealthy, but I was no wallflower, as I stood up and punched Bessie right in the face, giving her a very bloody nose, which then poured all over her pink raggedy flower dress. Instead of hitting me back, Bessie then said, "You shouldn't have done that, Missy," as she then got a needle and injected me with something that made me drowsy, as Tessie tied me to the chair with rope. Bessie then delights in telling me that she was happy that the 3 civil rights workers were murdered in Mississippi. She was also so happy that Robert Kennedy and Martin Luther King Jr. were dead and gone. I looked at Bessie and Tessie and just shook my head. Too bad that there were still people like this in the world with such hateful hearts. These political piggies and Hollywood stars for civil rights must all die, Bessie continued saying. I felt like punching her, but I was still drowsy from the injection that Bessie gave me. I then heard a huge crash in the basement window as I saw Apollo come in, followed by my boyfriend Cowboy. It seemed like the cavalry had arrived to save me. Tessie was quick as she charged my boyfriend with her hunter's knife, but Cowboy drew his gun and shot Tessie in the shoulder as she went down to the floor. Bessie then grabbed her double-barreled shotgun and aimed it at Cowboy, but Apollo pounced on her, pinning her to the basement floor. Cowboy then freed me from my chair that bound me as he started to call the cops. As he was doing so, he then said, "Dakota, watch out!" as I spun around to see Tessie getting up from the floor as she attacked me with her knife. I stopped her arm with the knife with one hand as I punched her down to the floor with my right hand, knocking her out cold as her knife went flying. "Don't worry, honey, I can manage," I said to Cowboy, smiling. Cowboy then got Apollo off from Bessie as he helped her up from the floor. Bessie then turned towards me as she spit into my face with anger. "You're a little pig, and you will always be one." I then asked my boyfriend to straighten Bessie out for me. "When you and your bitch sister wake up in the prison hospital, be sure to tell the nurses that Dakota sent you there," I said in anger as I curled my fist and punched with all my might. Bessie went down to the floor. She was knocked out cold as well. "Remind me to never make you angry, honey," my boyfriend said to me as we both laughed. When the police arrived, they arrested the twin sisters for kidnapping. It was found that the sisters were wanted for burglarizing some stores as well and would be in prison for a long time. My boyfriend, his dog, and I got into the car and drove home. In a few months, we graduated high school and eventually went to Texas University and finished that also, and then got married. Later on that year, we read that actress Sharon Tate and her friends were killed by some Charles Manson followers. Their case received so much more headlines than ours because they were famous and it happened in California and ours was in Texas. My boyfriend and I were not so surprised by these happenings because there was so much hate back in the 1960s, along with the Vietnam War going on, civil rights movement, and racist hate groups. I, for one, will always be grateful for Cowboy and his dog Apollo for saving my life. Thanks for listening to my story that happened a long time ago in Texas in 1969. And stay safe out there, everyone. I'm a female and I live in a small town in Louisiana. This is far from the scariest story that's been heard on here. But it is a big what if kind of story that leaves you assuming all the worst possible results that could have happened. So here it goes. I worked at a retail store that is inside of a Walmart. Like, they have up a portion of sales to rent the space, basically, if you are wondering. I don't really want to mention the company's name, but it's a global jewelry company. I was leaving work after a closing shift, which was around 8:10 p.m., so it was pretty dark and we worked alone most shifts. I was heading out into the parking lot to go to a restaurant right across from the Walmart I worked in for a holiday work meeting with my coworkers. As we were in retail and it was right before Christmas when sales are the highest. Once I got to my car, I noticed cash on my trunk. I don't remember the exact bill, but I believe it was a $20 bill. Having listened to spooky stories, including the ones on this channel and more, I immediately started internally freaking out, thinking it was an attempt to distract me and kidnap me, or the money was laced and tampered with, or worse. I quickly unlocked, jumped in my car and locked it, and checked all around me from in the car. I always kept my car locked and tried to be aware of my surroundings, but you never know. I have no idea what the intention behind this was, but it was a very scary situation for me. I immediately went to the restaurant and told my coworkers, looking for validation mostly in my decisions because I'm a rather petite 21-year-old, standing at 5'4" and 115 pounds and conventionally pretty, I guess. I just wanted to get this story out there so that people might be more aware. You never expect things like this to happen to you until they do. I want to preface a few things before I tell this story. I physically matured quite quickly when I was younger. Puberty hit me like a truck. I always looked much older than I was, and people would in turn treat me as such. Due to this older expectation, I learned behaviors that took me a long time to unlearn. I wanted to be a part of things that I should have never even known about. I think people forget that just because you look the part doesn't mean you've got any idea what's actually going on. Mentally, I was still a child, and I still had the critical thinking skills of a child. This is what led me to download the app Whisper. Don't know how many people remember that, but it gained a little bit of popularity amongst the teenagers I was surrounded by. It was an anonymous confession type app. I wanted to be mature like them. I struggle to tell this story because I still heavily blame myself and my own actions for the situation I ended up in, though I think it's important that I talk about it. Anyway, I started posting on this Whisper app. Just dumb things that any young teen would post. It's about a month before my 14th birthday, and I remember posting something along the lines of wishing I had more friends to celebrate with. At the time, I didn't know, but I was autistic, and for me personally, making and maintaining friendships is incredibly difficult. It was also harder to pick up social cues. Now, Whisper worked in a location-based thing that lets you see people within your general area or state. I'm not entirely sure, but if someone saw your post, they were likely within a 2-hour drive. Well, not long after my post, I received a DM from somebody. It's a guy. We chatted for about 2 weeks, and I figured out more about him and told him a bit about myself as well. I learned that he's 27 years old, he lives about an hour and a half away from me, and he has a sister that's just given birth to a kid. The conversation feels harmless at first. I don't have any alarm bells going off. The conversation is so normal, sometimes it's boring. Again, I wasn't able to pick up on a lot of social cues, so there were probably many things I never recognized. We talked about football, board games, movies, etc. Until one day I mentioned I accidentally cut my leg shaving, and he asked me to send him a photo of my legs. I don't understand what this means, so I sent a photo of my calf with the band-aid on it. He laughs at me, and I'm just completely oblivious. The next thing I can recall is somehow he'd asked me to be his girlfriend, and when I'd hesitated and told him I was sure that wasn't right, he guilt-tripped me, manipulated me by being all down on himself, saying that he would be forever alone, all sorts. Feeling bad and being so young, having no idea what manipulation even meant, I started apologizing, telling him that sure, we could try, age didn't matter. One thing leads to another, and we've planned to meet. I'm aware enough to know that my parents would be upset if they found out about this, but that if I'm going to meet him, it should be somewhere public. We decided on a local park. I tell my parents I'm going for a run, something that was typical of me at that age. Our town was safe. They weren't too concerned. They knew the route I was taking. I didn't mention this man. He drove 2 hours, took time out of his workday to come and see me. I recognize now then this is the desperation of a depraved individual. But back then, I didn't even think twice about it. I do my usual running route around this park and sit on the bench for a bit until he arrives. The first thing he tells me is that I'm hot. The second thing he does is ask me for a hug. I just say okay, nervous but thinking nothing bad can really happen. We're in public. There's 2 sports teams practicing on a field 50 meters away. There's a handful of other people on the walking trails. I was wrong. I hug him and he grabs at my rear. The action is borderline aggressive. He's sweaty. His shirt is sticking to his skin and I can smell the BO on him. I have to practically shove myself away. Immediately, I start taking one of the walking trails. He walks behind me for a moment, comments on how good looking I am, and then he keeps pace with me. I was too scared to run, too nervous to reach out to one of the handful of people at the park. I didn't know what to do, so I talk. I keep him busy with the conversation as we take the paths around the park. About 30 minutes in, he stops me at one of the more secluded places on the trail. You can see over the rest of the park, but nobody can really see you unless they're really trying to look. I feel my throat close up as he talks about how he actually brought another girl here before and the stuff they did with each other in this very spot. I can feel my hands beginning to shake slightly, and I just slowly nod my head. But instead of standing still, I keep walking. He has to jog to catch up to me. He looks disappointed. I don't care. I don't ask. Finally, the sensible part of my brain is kicking in. I'm going into survival mode. I tell myself if he makes one more move or movement, I'm going to send my fists flying. He doesn't. I walk with him back to his car in the parking lot. I stand a distance away from it, a few meters at least. He starts asking if I want to hang out longer, like go for a meal at a cafe or something. Absolutely not. This is a small town. I don't want anybody I know recognizing me with this man and telling my parents that I was out with some random guy. Something that I'm mad at myself for even thinking, but I'm glad I at least had some self-preservation in the moment. I tell him I have no money. He says he'll pay. I told him that we agreed to hang out during my daily run, not anything else. He tries to guilt trip me about how long it took him to drive down there. I reminded him that I said that I wouldn't hang out for too long. He offers to drive me home. I can feel every muscle in my body tensing up, preparing myself should he make any sudden moves. My lungs feel tight, like there isn't quite enough air in my body, and I can feel the bead of sweat dropping down my back. I say no. I tell him I haven't finished my run yet. He then asks for one final hug. I tell him no as he steps toward me, arms outstretched. I take a step back. I can see the rage on his face, the malice there. Then, by the grace of God, some old woman walking her dog takes notice. I don't know if she'd been watching from afar or simply just noticed in the moment, but she takes my arm and makes some excuse that I can't remember and then just pulls me away from him. I barely remember anything she said to me afterward. I just remember watching and waiting for his car to drive away so I could begin my run home, and then be sure that he wasn't going to follow me. I've never been so grateful for the existence of a single human. I owe her everything. Once I'm home from my run, I open up my Whisper app, immediately texting this guy and telling him how uncomfortable he made me, how I'm not really sure about this whole dating thing, and that I don't think we should meet ever again. He tells me I'm crazy, calls me all sorts of names, tells me I'm nowhere near as mature as he thought I was. I blocked him. I removed the Whisper app and I never touch it again. I still struggle to forgive myself for being so naive. I constantly have to remind myself that I was just a child and that I just didn't know any better. It's really difficult to not be hard on yourself, and I've only told this story a couple of times because of this. A reminder that it's not your fault. Don't blame yourself for someone else's twisted actions. Hello. I've thought about this one night when I was younger almost every day since it happened. To my knowledge, it's the only spooky thing that's happened to my family, collectively, so I know I didn't dream or imagine it. Eastern Oregon is home to some of the quaintest small towns and great mountain views, but often goes unnoticed by the common folk. Around the area I grew up in and where our family ranch still holds its ground and my parents still live, there is a huge need for helping hands when it comes to haying seasons to make sure we get it cut, raked, baled, and stacked before the end of the summer and before fire season is in full swing. This usually meant my dad was still out until 2, sometimes 3 a.m. and helping the neighbors after he was done for the day working on our ranch. When this harrowing event happened, I believe I was somewhere around 12 or 13 years old. My younger brother had his own room just down the hall to the left, while my younger sister and I shared a room. I am a very visual person, so remembering how, where, who you name it happens, I can remember weird details and often rehash those details in my mind for a little while until I journal, if it's journal worthy, that is. At the time, I was journaling everything and every day. It was mid-July when Dad told us that he was going to help our neighbors for the night get their hay up before he needed to go work our cows. That meant Mom and my siblings were in charge of holding down the fort. Or at least, that's what us kids told ourselves. Mom was very capable. After dinner, Mom let me stay up with her as late as we could stay up and watch Gilmore Girls, in hopes that maybe Dad will get done early. My brother and sister were fast asleep in their beds while Mom and I were snuggled on the couch. It wasn't until around midnight or a little after that Mom woke me up and said, "Let's go to bed." Reluctantly, I obeyed. But once I got to bed, I had a hard time falling back to that deep sleep I was in while on the couch. I didn't have a cell phone back in those days, as I was way too young, so I couldn't pass time by scrolling but only lay there in my moonlit room with the silence. Our house is located approximately 3 miles out of town and is in the middle of fields with 360 views of all the mountain ranges. Wind is no stranger to the area, but there was zero wind this night. I remember this night like it happened yesterday. There was no breeze or anything. It was almost eerie how quiet it was outside, and because it was July and we had no air conditioning in our house at the time, we slept with the windows open. So I would have heard the wind or seen sweeping through the sheer curtains Mom hung in me and my sister's room. There was a full moon and not a cloud in the sky, so you could see for miles, literally. But more importantly, you could see the county highway that is only 120 yards south of our house. The road is completely straight for about 15 before you even go around a corner. There are no taller trees to obstruct our view either. Virtually, we're in the middle of nowhere, as some would see it. Finally, I begin to drift off into dreamland when I'm suddenly awoken to the sound of knocking. But that was strange because if it were Dad, he wouldn't knock, he would just come in. And if Mom locked the house, then he knew where the hide key was. We then heard 3 more knocks yet again. That was twice now that the knocking came. I remember it so clearly. We had dogs, but there was no way it was one of them because they were in the laundry room, and I was old enough to decipher what their tail sounded like against the door versus what a person knocking on a wood door sounds like. And these knocks were loud that echoed all through the house. A little concerned at this point, I opened my door to the hallway to see my mom quietly walking past, only for her to be brushed past by my little brother running to the door like some kind of animal running towards a treat. "Get back! Get back to bed, Tristan! Get away from the door!" She yelled and whispered all at the same time. You know the one. Something about that instantly told me there was something off. But admittedly, I was relieved that I was not the only one to hear this ominous knocking. My brother had all but opened the damn door with his hand on the doorknob before Mom stopped him. There I am standing in my bedroom doorway with my mom waiting for my brother to come back and eventually go back to his bedroom. Mom whispers to me to get back to bed as she continues down the hallway, then into the kitchen. We don't live in a big house, so from my room looking down to the right, you can see the living room, kitchen, and the back door, where the knocking was coming from. I couldn't bring myself to go back to bed like Mom instructed. I was a nervous wreck, so I had to make sure Mom was going to be okay. Once my mom got to the other half of the kitchen, it happened again. 3 more knocks. The loudest knocks coming from the back door. I hear my mom say in her loud voice, "Hello, who is it?" She asks to no answer. Nothing. I still can't believe she had the guts to do that, but that woman opened the door with what looked like no fear. There with the moonlight creeping in from the door, nothing. There was nothing. No person, no animal, just the moonlight and my mom. Feeling somewhat relieved, I watched my mom close the door and lock it. She made her way back to me. I then heard my little sister wake up. "What's wrong?" Not wanting to scare her, I told her it was nothing and to not worry and just go back to sleep. I hug my mom as she tells me goodnight for the second time, and I turn around, close the door, and then get back to bed. I had a digital alarm clock next to my bed. Checking the time finally, it read 3:30 a.m. The next morning, we told my dad what we had heard, and in true fashion, Dad didn't believe us no matter how much we insisted, no matter how much we broke down every single detail. Dad just shrugged it off. But because he didn't have to go to the haying fields that night, my dad got a wake-up call. Or should I say knock. Just like the previous night, there were 3 knocks. Only this time, Dad was the one inspecting. I again woke up knocking and opened my door to see what was going on. My brother was asleep, and my dad came down the hall with his gun. Again, 3 more additional knocks. My dad didn't speak. He just briskly moved through the house, and before the 3rd round of knocking came, Dad flung open the door like a madman and was met with moonlight and an empty doorway, just like the night before. I remember my dad just standing there in the empty doorway for a couple of seconds looking out and then walking into the sitting room, then to the living room looking out the windows. Dad then turned in for the night. Once I closed my door, I went through every possible explanation. Was there someone parked on the highway who walked down to the house? No, because we couldn't see any of the vehicles parked anywhere on the road. Because like I stated previously, the moonlight was so bright you could see for miles. It wasn't the dogs. It wasn't any other kind of animal either. Just what the hell was it? The next morning, Dad, Mom, and I discussed what had happened, and Dad was just as puzzled and freaked out. He was also trying to come up with explanations, but was just met with defeat in doing so. I feel it's important to note that our property doesn't have any record of previous owners other than the 1910, and that nothing much is known about it other than my grandfather was practically gifted it when they came here from Georgia in the 60s. We only know that the family who lived here before us in 1910 also had a small cattle operation and was perhaps a vet or doctor. When Dad was doing some irrigation work years ago, I found many medicine bottles, empty syringes, a pocket watch, and a few cannonballs and bullets. I've done an endless amount of research on our property and reached out to the local courthouse to gather any property records they might have. But I'm always met with what I already know. We never heard the knocking again after the 2nd night. So we are left with who or what was that at our door in the middle of the night? What did it want? Why that night? Why did it never happen again? Once in high school, when I started to gain more friends, they would come out for a movie night, and they would always joke about how it was creepy at my house at night and they didn't want to leave alone after the movie nights. They talked about how eerie it feels here in the summer during the night. I tend to agree. Maybe whatever it was, it stayed but just remained silent for unknown reasons. Now that I'm 31 years old, we still talk about it when we get together at Mom and Dad's and we go over the details of that night. It still evokes a sense of fear whenever it's brought up. Though nothing has happened like that since, sometimes when visiting my parents, I feel unnerved and bothered. Like something is watching me through the windows. Like at any time, I will feel a warm breath on the back of my neck. It's creepy. This took place when I was about 18 years old in the small town of Ceballos, Durango, Mexico. For some context, back in 2007, my dad decided that he wanted to move back to his hometown after having spent most of his life in the US after migrating from Mexico at the age of 18. He later on realized the work there was less than ideal and took little to support himself, my mom, and all 5 of his kids. He moved back to the US along with my mom and 4 siblings who joined him at a later date. I stayed behind with a boyfriend I had at the time because I ended up getting knocked up. Now to the story. For several years, our little town would occasionally have crazy crap happen. Shootings, fights from men being drunk, the norm, I guess. However, this incident was really scary, and it stayed with me since it happened. Back in 2010, on a seemingly normal day, I had gotten up to make breakfast for my boyfriend, who at the time used to bake and sell pan dulce, which is essentially sweet bread. On my way over to the area where he'd work, I noticed a brand new Shelby Silverado parked right up the dirt road near my home, leading to the main road. I figured it was a visitor from the city for the neighbors, so I didn't pay much attention. Several days I had passed with the truck still parked in the same spot. Now, I don't know if you're aware, but Mexico is known for its violence and heavy cartel activity. I learned quickly that day that small meaningless towns weren't the exception. After several days of deliberation with my boyfriend telling him it was strange that a brand new truck was just abandoned there, I begged him to call the authorities so they could come investigate. Sure enough, about a day or so later, the police came and inspected the truck as a crowd of people gathered around to watch. We hoped it was nothing and it would just be a broken down truck, but I was wrong. They had to call someone to pick the lock for the snug top to access the truck's bed, and when they opened it, the horrible stench that came from the truck is something I'll never forget. They discovered 3 bodies, 2 males and 1 female wrapped really well in heavy blankets and plastic tarps. They later determined it to be cartel related and informed the public that they had been severely tortured and decapitated. I moved back in the United States in 2012 for unrelated reasons, but I have to say this for sure played a part in my farewell to Mexico. About an hour ago, my manager and I were closing shifts at a store in my small town in the north, off the main road and across rent-controlled apartments. I was waiting at the register as usual and watching people come in around 10 minutes before close, watching who came in so that I could make sure they all left. There was a guy that came in after a girl that I randomly hyperfixated on. He walked down the main aisle towards the bathrooms and then just went out of sight. I don't know why, but I wanted to make sure he left. Customer after customer came and went, the ones I saw come in, but 5 minutes to closing time, he never left. My manager went to the bathroom and I stayed by the register until she came out and went to the office. I walked around the first few aisles in the front towards the door and I didn't see him. My manager came out and wanted to buy some things right before we were supposed to close. I told her that I saw a guy come in but didn't see him leave. I felt really uncomfortable and disturbed and thought it was just because I'd been listening to an insanely creepy podcast at the time. But after she checked the whole store and then I went around and checked with her, we saw that he'd left a basket. We went into the office after I grabbed my stuff and we checked the cameras several times. We saw him come in. We watched the cameras again. Forwards and backwards, every camera, outside and inside, right by the exit and incoming door. He never left. We decided to leave after about half an hour and called our general manager. I never saw him leave. The cameras never even recorded him leaving. I've been terrified since it just happened.